circle the 5th of April 2027 on your calendar. If you are a retiree in the United Kingdom, with money sitting in a savings account, that date matters more than almost anything else this year. From the 6th of April 2027, the rules on how your savings interest gets taxed change, and it is already written into law. The change could cost some retirees a few £100 more in tax every single year, and most people have never heard of it. Here is the mechanism. In plain English, right now your personal allowance, the £12,570 you are allowed to earn before paying any income tax, can be shared out between your pension and your savings interest in whichever way saves you the most tax. From the 6th of April 2027, that flexibility disappears. Your personal allowance has to be used against your pension first, before a penny of it can protect your savings interest. And on the same date, the tax rate charged on that savings interest goes up as well. I am going to show you exactly how this works using real numbers from a retiree's own savings account. Then I will walk you through the step-by-step plan to move your money before the deadline without losing a penny of interest along the way. If you are a retiree who wants to hold on to more of what you have saved, hit subscribe now. I will walk you through every step of this. Most people assume their savings account is the safe, boring part of their finances. Let me show you the number that proves otherwise. Let me give you the number first. Take Alan, a retired engineer from Leeds. He gets the full new state pension, which for the 2026 to 2027 tax year works out at £241.30 a week, or £12,547.60 a year. He also has a modest works pension of £4,500 a year on top. Add it up, and that is £17,047.60 in pension income before he has earned a single pound of interest. His personal allowance, the amount he can earn tax-free, is £12,570. His pension alone already uses almost all of it, leaving him just £522.40 of room in what is called the starting rate for savings, a separate band worth up to £5,000 that shrinks pound for pound as your other income rises above the personal allowance. And that £522.40 you just heard is about to shrink further for a lot of people once the second change lands. Now add his savings. Alan has £60,000 in a fixed-rate bond earning 4.5%, which pays him £2,700 a year in interest. Under today's rules, £522.40 of that sits in the starting rate band tax-free, and another £1,000 sits inside his personal savings allowance, also tax-free. That leaves £1,177.60 taxed at 20%, a bill of £235.52. Here is what changes. From the 6th of April 2027, the tax rate on that taxable slice rises by 2 percentage points, from 20% to 22%. Alan's bill on the same £1,177.60 becomes £259.07. Not a fortune on its own, but it is a permanent increase year after year for as long as his money sits where it is. The second change matters even more for some people than it does for Alan, because the personal allowance now has to go to pension income first. Anyone whose pension already fills their allowance on its own gets zero allowance protection left for their savings, no matter how the numbers might otherwise have worked in their favour. The flexibility that used to soften the blow is simply gone. I used to think of the starting rate for savings as a kind of safety net, something that quietly protected ordinary savers without them having to do anything about it. Then I sat down and ran the numbers properly and realized how easily that safety net shrinks to almost nothing. The real risk is not the tax bill on £60,000 today. It is what happens to that same account in 3 years once the state pension has risen again and the last of that starting rate band has gone. The starting rate for savings sounds like a gift. Up to £5,000 of interest, completely tax-free, on top of your personal allowance. In practice, for a lot of retirees, it is already half gone before they have earned a pound of interest, and it keeps shrinking every year the state pension goes up. Here is why. The starting rate only survives on the gap between your personal allowance and £17,570. Every pound of pension or other income above £12,570 eats into that gap, pound for pound. Alan's pension income sits at £17,047.60, just £522.40 below that ceiling. The state pension rises most years, and a modest increase next year, or a small part-time job, could wipe out what is left of his starting rate entirely. That is a cliff edge, not a gentle slope. One extra pound of pension income does not cost him one extra pound of tax. It can knock out a whole slice of interest that used to sit tax-free, all at once. I have sat down with my own accounts more than once and been surprised by this. I had savings spread across 3 different banks, each earning a little interest, and I genuinely assumed the starting rate would cover all of it without me needing to check properly. I was closer to the edge than I realized. This is not a story about people who did something wrong. Nobody teaches you how the starting rate for savings actually behaves, because for most of your working life it never mattered. It only starts to bite once your pension income climbs close to that £17,570 line, which is roughly where a lot of retirees with a full state pension and a small workplace pension now sit. There is a real cost to waiting here, and it is easy to miss because nothing feels urgent while your starting rate band still has room in it. Wait until your pension has crept past that line, and you are no longer choosing where your savings sit. You are just doing damage control on tax for a year you have already lived through, with no way to go back and change it. Act while there is still room in the band and the choice stays yours. Leave it a year or two, and the room simply is not there anymore, no matter how carefully you plan. So how do you protect yourself? The answer is not complicated, but it does take an actual plan, not a single phone call, and a vague hope that it sorts itself out. There are 4 steps to this, and they work best in order. Step 1. Audit. List every savings account you hold, the interest rate on each one, the maturity date if it is fixed, and any penalty for withdrawing early. You cannot make a good decision about money you have not actually looked at in one place. Step 2. Prioritise. Move the accounts with no penalty first, the ordinary easy access savings sitting in a high street bank, earning very little. Those cost you nothing to move today. For fixed-rate bonds, do the maths before you touch anything. Here is how that maths works, using Alan's £60,000 bond at 4.5%. His bank charges a penalty equal to roughly 90 days of interest for withdrawing early, which comes to around £670 on his balance. That sounds like a real loss, and it is. But once his interest sits inside an ISAR wrapper, he stops paying tax on it altogether, saving him close to £250 a year based on his own numbers. Divide the one-off penalty by the annual saving, and the bond has paid for itself again in under 3 years. Every year after that is money he simply keeps. Step 3. Execute. Open a cash ISAR and use a proper ISAR transfer, not a withdrawal followed by a new deposit. The difference matters. A transfer keeps the money inside the tax-free wrapper the whole way through. Withdraw it first and redeposit it yourself, and you have used up your ISAR allowance for the year without protecting a single pound of the money that was already sitting there. Step 4. Optimise. The ISAR allowance for the 2026 to 2027 tax year is £20,000 per person. For anything above that, premium bonds can hold up to £50,000 per person, and any prizes are tax-free, even though they are not guaranteed interest in the way a savings account is. This is the exact framework I worked through on my own savings, account by account. I remember sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon with a spreadsheet open and a cup of tea going cold beside me, trying to work out which account to move first. It took longer than I expected, mostly because I kept finding accounts I had half forgotten about. But what if you are married or in a civil partnership? The rules work differently for couples, and there is an opportunity most households never use. Married couples and civil partners have 2 personal allowances, 2 starting rate bands, and 2 personal savings allowances between them. Most never use that properly, because joint savings accounts split the interest straight down the middle by default, regardless of who actually needs the protection. Take Alan and his wife Jean. Alan's pension income already fills almost all of his personal allowance, as we have seen. Jean works part-time and earns £6,000 a year. Her personal allowance covers that easily, with £6,570 left completely unused. If their savings sit in a joint account, half the interest is taxed against Alan's tight, nearly full allowance. If the same money sits in John's name instead, it lands against her spare £6,570 of unused allowance, plus her own full starting rate band and personal savings allowance on top of that. Moving the account from joint names into Jean's name alone could shelter the entire £2,700 of interest from tax, rather than just a slice of it. This matters more than it used to, not less. Now that the personal allowance has to go against pension and earnings first, moving savings to whichever spouse has spare allowance is one of the few ways left to get real allowance protection on your interest. Couples who also want to shift some unused allowance across can look at the marriage allowance, worth £1,260 a year, though that is a separate mechanism from simply deciding where the savings themselves sit. This is the kind of planning that makes a genuine difference, and it costs nothing to do. But knowing the rules is only half of it. The bigger barrier for most people is not the paperwork. It is what is going on in their own head about even opening the statements in the first place. If you have known about some of this for a while and still have not moved anything, you are not lazy and you are not bad with money. There is a well-documented pattern where people avoid checking on stressful financial information because not knowing feels safer than finding out something unwelcome. Some psychologists call it the ostrich effect, and it shows up especially around tax, because tax feels complicated and a little bit like being tested on something you were never actually taught. You worked for decades, you saved responsibly when plenty of people did not, and now it can feel like the rules keep shifting under you, as if the goalposts move every time you get close. That frustration is fair, but letting it keep you from opening one account and moving one sum of money only ends up costing you more, not less. Here is a small shift that helps. Do not think of this as moving your savings. Think of it as locking in your tax-free status while you still can on your own terms, rather than reacting to a smaller bill after the fact. Most of the actual steps take minutes, not hours, once you sit down and do them. A few concrete things you can do this month. Check your tax code and your income details on your personal tax account through gov.uk, so you know exactly what your pension and other income actually add up to. Add up the total interest you earned last year across every account, not just the one you check most often. Open a cash ISA and use a proper transfer for any fixed bonds or easy access savings you decide to move. If you are married or in a civil partnership, have an honest conversation about whose name the savings sit in and why. None of this requires a specialist qualification to understand. It requires sitting down once with your actual numbers in front of you, rather than a rough guess in your head. Most people who put this off are not confused about the maths. They are avoiding the moment of finding out how the numbers land, because until you look, you can tell yourself it is probably fine. It might be fine. Plenty of retirees will look at their own numbers and find the change barely touches them. But you will not know which kind of retiree you are until you actually check, and the 6th of April 2027 is coming whether you check or not. The deadline is real. The change to the tax rules is already law. But how much it costs you, if anything at all, is still something you have a say over. Let's bring this together. Audit every account you hold. Prioritise moving the ones with no penalty first, and do the maths properly on any fixed bonds before you touch them. Execute the move using a proper ISA transfer, never a withdrawal and a fresh deposit. And optimise anything left over, using premium bonds for amounts above your ISA allowance. The 5th of April, 2027, is the last day of the current tax year under the old rules. The 6th of April, 2027, is when the new ones start, with your personal allowance locked to your pension first, and a higher tax rate on whatever savings interest falls outside your allowances. Neither of those dates is going anywhere. None of this is about chasing a perfect outcome or squeezing out every last pound. It is about not leaving money on the table simply because opening the statements felt like a chore for one afternoon. The cost of an hour spent moving an account is small. The cost of leaving it exactly where it is, year after year, adds up in a way that is easy to underestimate. If you are a retiree in the United Kingdom who wants to keep more of what you actually earned, hit subscribe. I put out a new video every week walking through exactly this kind of change in plain English, so you are not caught out by the fine print. And if you know someone, a neighbour, a sibling, an old colleague who has a savings account and has not heard about any of this, send them this video. It might be the most useful few minutes they watch all month.